You're watching Open Agenda. Here's our host, Joe White.
Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me today is Dr. Joe Venosa. Thanks for coming out, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
So, we've had some delays in the last week with the snow. The city council meeting has actually been pushed back to January 9th.
Yeah.
We really won't have the results of all those public hearings till next week. But before we even get into that, I want to talk about the city council meeting on Monday the 13th. Right?
Yeah, because we're getting snowed regardless.
Yes, it does feel like it, doesn't it? So, look, this is going to be the second reading of the text amendment to change the zoning density in the downtown business district from 40 units per acre to 80. This is not a new subject. This started about 2 years ago with an appeal to get an exception. The exception was thrown out even by a judge. But the public voice does not seem to be resonating with the elected leaders. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say the public voice is not only being not registering, but it's being suppressed in many ways.
Well, how do you say?
Well, one of the things that's most concerning, apart from the fact that there are various elected officials that have what many people would feel are conflicts of interests regarding some of these particular pieces of legislation or amendments, is the fact that even the very basic ability of citizens to participate in their local city government has been increasingly marginalized.
Well, let's talk about these conflicts, because we documented with the planning and zoning. Their second meeting was back in November. They passed it 6-1.
Yeah.
Long meeting, but as soon as all the hearing was over, they didn't have discussion. They went right into to their preset script.
It was a preset, yeah.
And we talked about how 4 of those members are either lifetime members of the Greater Salisbury Committee, current members, and so was the developer asking for this text amendment.
Correct, and in many cases, personal friends, which also adds to it. And in case of one member, I believe, works for one of the developers who may benefit from.
Well, two of the seats on planning and zoning. One is occupied by the county council, Joe Holloway. He was there. Now, he's the one person who voted against it. But the other one is city council president, Deshaun Dowdy. And he's the one you're referring to. I mean, he works for Green Street Housing.
Green Street Housing, right.
And they stand to benefit from this project, correct?
Correct, that's my understanding.
And it's been asked for folks to recuse themselves, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think this is? I mean, where's the disconnect here? Are we asking too much?
I think we're in an era where politicians, particularly those that maybe have ambition or have their sights set on greater or bigger or higher office, or maybe just people that have never really dealt with community concerns like this, either generally don't care or are looking at it as something in which they hope most of the public will just ignore or forget about.
Well, we just did get the minutes released from the closed session from June 30th of 2023.
Yeah.
And those minutes, it was deemed by the state of Maryland that
it was an illegal meeting.
It should have been an open meeting. Still, parts of those minutes are redacted.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little later on in the show with Bob Taylor about the specifics there. But that meeting really was the doorway, the gateway to selling these parking lots, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting how there are a lot of little bits of that transcript of that meeting that the public now finally has that really do, I would say, reveal ultimately what this project is actually about. I mean, because you get to see sort of, you get to peek behind the curtain, as it were, if you actually are able to read that PDF of that meeting transcript.
So if people still do want to participate, and it's still important that they do, the one key is they need to register online by noon on Monday or in person by 6 sharp, right?
Correct, right. So again, in previous eras, as in last month and prior, any citizen could show up and write out a form and participate in the public comments for up to 3 minutes. Now that's
4 minutes, actually.
I'm sorry, 4 minutes. 4 minutes. And because the city council was meeting 4 times a month, a citizen actually theoretically could speak for 16 minutes per month on certain topics. Now that the council is cutting its work down by half, which will make for more hectic and busy meetings, and also cutting down the public comment time. What that means is the average citizen goes from having 16 minutes for their ability to articulate a concern or a point of view, or in some cases ask a question, from 16 minutes all the way down to 4. So 75% of the time that the public could have to provide public comments has now been taken away.
Plus Zoom, right?
Plus the Zoom option has now been taken away, although only for regular people. It's my understanding that staff and elected officials can still use Zoom, but not regular folks to make comments. Now, the excuse that we've heard, at least from some officials through social media recently, is that there were several Zoom bombing incidents where there were sort of offensive or sexual images posted on the Zoom call. Now, it's important to note that hundreds of municipalities across the country conduct Zoom meetings and are able to screen out these kinds of things. And it was never initially the reason given, meaning this has only come out now with the City Council on the defensive.
As they've been trying to limit it.
As they've been trying to limit. So putting aside that, though, even if you agree that the Zoom thing or the Zoom limits would maybe take away certain possible intrusions, it still is limiting the physical ability of citizens to give comment. And because of the fact that now you have to have access to a computer by noon of the day of the meeting to submit your comments in advance, and you can't physically hand in comments after 6 p.m. the day of the meeting, what it means is if somebody has a physical disability, somebody has an injury, somebody can't find parking, let's say, that's convenient, and they show up to a meeting at 6:01 or 6:02, they theoretically would be prevented from engaging in public comments by these new rules.
Joe, how ironic. They may not be able to find parking. You know,
The jokes write themselves,
yeah,
Joe.
sometimes, right? So big meeting for the City Council on the 13th, Monday. The County Council is going to have a special session on Tuesday, the 14th, 3 p.m. in the same room 301 in the government office building. But between us being here and that meeting, there will be the regular meeting that got pushed back because of the snowstorm. Look, there's probably more in this than we could even cover if we had an hour. But bottom line is, there's 9 public hearings at the County Council meeting. That's Thursday the 9th.
Bring your popcorn.
It shows you the priorities of the direction of our county leaders, especially the county executive.
Yeah.
Most of these revolve around liquor licenses and that sort of thing. And this goes against exactly what was presented to us a year ago with task force from Greater Salisbury Committee, the Chamber of Commerce in Salisbury, and then even our delegation coming back from Annapolis.
Absolutely.
Carl Anderton could not have said it any better.
Oh, yeah.
Open the door.
You have to give
We might as well walk through.
You have to give the former delegate Anderton a lot of credit. He definitely speaks his mind.
Well, when we come back next week, we're going to take some time to talk to Bob Taylor today. We'll give updates on just really the direction. There's so much going on. It would just be impossible to speculate all the different directions this could go. Yeah. One other point that they're going to discuss tonight is whether or not to delay approving the CIP, the capital improvement plan, until they have more budget information. Some from the state budget deficit issues. We just saw Governor Moore come out with a decree saying, "Hey, look, the hurt is actually really coming."
It's about a $2 billion cut that he wants to initiate or find,
and that's just the first step.
That's just the first step.
And then also too, we don't have the final results from the fiscal year 2024 yet. The executive's finance office is still late getting those back to us.
We're waiting.
So, yeah. All right, so obviously stay tuned for next week, right?
Definitely.
All right, so when we come back, we're going to have Bob Taylor in the studio to discuss the density text amendment that's going to happen at the Salisbury City Council meeting on January 13th, and also the more wide-ranging impacts that this change could have outside of just this one project. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me today is retired attorney Bob Taylor from Wacomico County. Yeah. Thanks for coming out. So just a little background. You've been on the show before, but you lived in the county for over 50 years? So.
Moved here in 71.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you know a little something about Wacomico County, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, this coming Monday, January 13th at 6 o'clock.
Let me interrupt for a second. I'm going to take my hat off. 7:30 tonight. Let the game begin and the best team win. It's Notre Dame.
Okay. You're even going to put it
I'll put it right
prominently
there.
All right.
Yeah,
All right. Well, we're going to hold you to that. We're going to have you back on next week to go over the highlights, right? Well, talking about highlights, the meeting of City Council on January 13th is likely to be a very important meeting. It's the second reading for the increase of density, the amendment to the code, right?
Well, yeah, what it is, it would double the density from 40 units per acre to 80 for residential development in the downtown Salisbury, what's called the Central Business District.
Okay.
And it may not be the second reading. I'm not sure that they will do it that night. It is going to be the public hearing.
Okay.
At least it's been advertised. I guess they could always change that, but the agenda's not out yet, so I can't swear to it.
Okay.
But I'd be pretty sure that that's what's going to happen.
Well, let's tell a little bit of the story of how we're getting to where this is
Yeah.
the second reading. There was a planning and zoning meeting in November. You were at
Well,
that meeting, right?
let's even go a little further back than that.
Okay.
The group that wants to build the 220 apartments, now these would be on 3 parking lots that are between Division Street, essentially, and the river.
Okay.
The real big parking lot behind the library, that's one, and then there's 2 others. These lots and then the density right now doesn't support 220 units.
Okay.
So they would have to have it increased. Last year, in 2023, they applied for what's called a special exception to increase it to the amount they need, which is 77 units per acre.
Okay.
And incidentally, all these figures are without any parking on the site where the apartments would be for the tenants. You don't have to have that anymore in downtown Salisbury.
Yeah, it's not part of the. It's not part of the.
So they
equation.
applied for it. They went before the Board of Appeals, and the Board of Appeals turned down the special exception.
Okay.
Now, after that, a group that I was part of went to court and challenged. They actually appealed the Board of Appeals ruling.
The developer did.
Yeah, we then appeared in the court case and asked that it be thrown out because under Maryland zoning law, you have 2 types of law in Maryland for zoning. One's state, one's local. And under the state law, which trumps the local law, you can't do density increase by special exception.
It has
and
to
that
be
and
per
that's what the
amendment.
court ruled. Yeah.
Okay.
So now they're back essentially trying to come in the back door and saying, well, let's just change the density. Let's just up it to what we need.
Yeah.
And
maybe a
they
little
can
bit
do
more.
that, and the city council can do that. They are allowed to do that. And that's what the hearing will be about on Monday night.
But this new process, the one that started after they lost the appeal, did start with planning and zoning, right?
Oh, yes, they have to, when you file for what's called a text change, you want to change something in the zoning code, it has to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation.
And we've talked many times with different guests on the show, Randy Taylor, Joe Holloway. Planning and zoning is is really the only committee that is shared with the city and the county. Is that
Well, I'm not sure it's the only one, but in terms of zoning, it is.
Yeah.
Because each jurisdiction, the county and the city, have separate boards of appeal.
Okay.
We've had this combined Planning and Zoning Commission for many, many decades.
Okay.
We are, as far as I know, it's the only location in Maryland where a county and the city have a combined Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay.
I may be incorrect on that, but I mean, I'm not aware of any others.
But you were at the November planning and zoning meeting.
I
where
was
they had the
there.
public
I was
hearing?
both there in October and November. They had 2 hearings.
So did you speak out against the text amendment?
Yeah, I did. I mean, we were limited in time, but I did speak, as a lot of other people did too.
Yeah. So I thought one of the curious things coming out of that planning and zoning meeting is they went right in from public hearing. I mean, the DID report from the staff actually spoke against this text amendment. They had the public hearing, and outside of people who ran in the circles of the developer, there was a lot of folks who were against it. But they went right into a resolution. Did that strike you
Well,
as odd?
I put it this way: there was no what I would call substantial discussion among the members of any points that were later put into a resolution or a motion, I guess it was, to make a recommendation. This was read, it was pre-scripted, was read off by the chairman, and then they just voted for it. And one person voted against it. It was the county council member, Joe Holloway of the commission.
And at that meeting, he asked for that vote to actually just be delayed so they could kind of process this information.
He didn't, but another member said something like, we've had a lot of information presented, and we ought to take this under consideration and come back. And I would assume he meant at a later day.
But they didn't. They went ahead.
Yeah,
and
they
voted
went
on
right ahead and decided it. Yeah.
And it seems like the city council, who's had it since their first December meeting, is kind of rolling through this at a pretty fast rate, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think they're going as fast as they can. That's right. Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah.
So they had to do a first reading in December, which they did, and that was voted 4-1 to move it on to a second reading.
Right.
So this public hearing is prior to that second reading.
Yeah, under the state law, you have to have a public hearing, and it has to be advertised. It's in a certain way.
Okay.
And that's why we're at the end of that advertising and hearing process.
So is it at this meeting that the rules are going to change for how long you can speak at a public hearing?
Okay,
for the city
we're
of
kind
Salisbury?
of, is this different subject now?
Yeah, but is that going to?
Well, my understanding is that, and as far as I know, this has just been authorized by the president of the council, Deshaun Doherty, and I don't think it's gone before the entire council. The county charter, the city charter, says that the council makes its rules, not the city council's president.
Okay.
So as far as I know, this is essentially, I'm guessing, an edict.
Well, then I do want to ask you more questions about that later in the show. But let's continue on with this part. So why is this text amendment important? I mean, how is this going to impact the average citizen?
Well, the difference between what they wanted originally when they went before the Board of Appeals was it would have only applied to their property, the 3 lots I mentioned.
Okay.
What they're doing now is they're changing the requirement for the entire zoning district, the central business district, which includes what everybody would consider, I think, downtown Salisbury, including some property over along Carroll Street, the old Daily Times property that the hospital now owns and plans to develop, as I understand it, for residential use for the hospital. And some other property, too, that's along Riverside Drive, coming out of that cul-de-sac.
So this doesn't just impact these parking lots. It actually impacts the whole central business district.
Yeah, pardon me, I said cul-de-sac, I meant roundabout, that is there now on Carroll Street, yeah.
But I mean, okay, I live out in the country, Wycomico County. I'm a county resident, not a city resident. Why do I care? I mean, what difference does it make to me?
Well, I think what's going to happen, what you're having here, and we didn't state this earlier, the city has sold almost all of the open parking lots in downtown Salisbury.
Okay.
Not just these 3 that we've been talking about here, but also Lot 10, which is where the flea market used to be held.
Okay.
Lot 16, which is along one of the prongs of the river. And so all of that parking is going to disappear as these lots are developed. And the development of it will increase the parking demand just for those locations, but it will eliminate the parking that's there now.
That they need, and it's
So
not a requirement that they put it back as they
and there's
build.
no requirement at all. Now, I understand one of them does plan to have some on-site parking. But the long and short of it is there's just not enough parking downtown. There won't be if this goes through like this.
Okay. Well, I want to ask you some more questions about that 2-minute limit and some other closed session meeting stuff that has recently come out. Would you stick around another segment? Because I want to dive into this further, and I also want to make sure everybody understands how and when their voice could be heard.
Sure enough. Yeah.
So when we come back, we're going to ask Bob Taylor a little bit more about the legal workings of just what is next in this property or this density amendment, and how anyone out there can get their voice out there. So stay with us, and we'll be right back.
The Upper Ferry operates on the Wycomico River and connects the west side of the county on the peninsula between the Nanticoke and Wycomico rivers to Eden, which is situated south of Fruitland, thus bypassing the big city. The Upper Ferry is one of 2 public ferry boat operations on the Wycomico River and is the first place to cross the river south of Salisbury. The upper ferry helps to reduce traffic congestion near downtown Salisbury, where, if not for the ferry, one would have to cross the river on the Route 50 or Fitzwater Street drawbridges. The ride across the river is very short, only about 2 minutes, but you'll be able to enjoy a pleasant view while avoiding city traffic. The upper ferry is a small vessel with a maximum capacity of 3 cars, 6 passengers, or 10,000 pounds. The ferry boat runs along a heavy wire cable beneath the water's surface, so if you're boating on the Wicomico River near the upper ferry and you see it underway, please come to a full stop and wait, because the cable is pulled up to the surface as the ferry boat cruises along and can snag your outdrive or propeller, creating a dangerous situation for both you and the ferry boat alike. The ferry boat has the right-of-way at all times and is privileged under the inland navigation rules as a vessel restricted in its ability to maneuver, which is visibly indicated on the ferry's masthead during daylight hours by 3 vertically aligned geometric black shapes depicting a ball over a diamond over a ball. After dark, or in conditions of limited visibility when the day shapes can't be easily seen, you'll see 3 vertically aligned lights on the masthead, configured as red over white over red. Before your boat continues its journey up or down the river, it's best to wait until the ferry lands on either bank to ensure everyone's safety. There's no charge to ride on the upper ferry, and it runs 7 days per week, year-round, but is closed on county holidays. The ferry's hours of operation are adjusted seasonally, and there are times when the boat is out of service for repairs or when weather or river conditions cause operations to be temporarily suspended. So, it's always best to check the Wicomico County Department of Public Works website before leaving home, or you can call the ferry hotline at 410-543-2765 for a status report. This is Mike Goldberg for Open Agenda. Back to you, Joe.
Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Joe White. In the studio with me for another segment is Bob Taylor. Thank you for sticking around. So in the first segment, we talked about the January 13th meeting for the Salisbury City Council, the second reading for the density increase up to 80 units per acre. What I want to talk to you about is, there's a long history here. And it began with selling the parking lots to the same developers looking to develop these parking lots. Is that
Well,
correct?
when you say the same developers, there are actually several different ones.
Okay.
And at least in terms of the 3 lots that the apartments, the 220 apartments are proposed for, there is quite a history of that. It goes back to 2015.
Okay.
There was originally a deal with a company called Devreco LLC for just 2 of those lots.
Okay.
Long story, that was supposed to go to settlement after they got their building permit. They never applied, as far as I know, they never applied for a building permit. They never applied for the zoning approvals they needed, and that just sat there.
Okay.
So what they did in 2023, last year, in the summer, they approved an amendment of that original contract of sale to a different group, Salisbury Town Center Apartments LLC, and they threw in another parking lot, which happens to be parking lot 15. That's the one that is down by the Opportunity Shop.
Okay.
That's run by the one of the churches, the old synagogue building. It's a lot of perhaps 40, 50 cars, very, very essential for those businesses right in that area.
So you would see that's why there's so much concern with some of the business owners
Well,
down on that side.
that's right, for some of them. And now we have even more apartments. 220 is more than what I think would have been there originally. I forget what the number was under the 2015 agreement.
So just recently, we just were able to receive the minutes from a closed session from June 30th, 2023. I think this is maybe the meeting you're discussing.
That's right.
So that was initially a closed session meeting, right?
Yes, they had a work session that essentially went into a closed meeting.
Okay.
And those minutes from that meeting have been released just within the last week or so. They're redacted. In other words, that means certain parts have been eliminated, blacked out, so you can't read them. The parts that have been blacked out, it appears, are comments that were made by the attorney again, it was this attorney, Rena Patel, acting as a special counsel for the city at that meeting. The meeting was closed to discuss matters with council and to discuss the contract, the changing the contract over and throwing in Lot 15 to this new deal.
But this was later found to be, this should have been an open meeting. This
Well,
violated the Open Meetings Act?
It wasn't a violation in terms of why they closed it. It was a violation in terms of some things that were done after they closed it.
Okay.
And again, a group that I was a part of filed a complaint with the Open Meetings Compliance Board, and that's what the Compliance Board ruled.
Now, how should it have gone? They've gone into closed session, then come back out, back into
Well,
open
they
work
did.
session?
Yeah, they went back out into a work session and decided to move it on to their regular meeting agenda to actually approve the contract of sale. That regular meeting to do that was held minutes after the work session ended.
Oh.
So there was no in-between time for anybody in the public other than the few people who happened, well, actually more than few, it's about 24, who happened to be at the meeting to say anything.
So why is this so significant? Why? I mean, obviously you have
Well-
the minutes now, but this deal's already done, correct?
Yeah, it's a done deal, and I think for that reason, and I've sent an email to the council saying, why can't we get what the attorney said?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the reason? Nobody's suing the city. You've closed the contract. You've deeded the property to this new group, this Salisbury Town Center LLC. So why shouldn't we have this? But, you know, it seems, I mean, it's been over a year just to get the redacted minutes. These were asked for back in the fall of last year, 2023, over a year ago.
Yeah. So you really had to fight hard to get this information, to get the transparency.
Yeah, fortunately, somebody filed another request, and they gave these redacted minutes to us.
So we're in a situation now where, I mean, this process is definitely rolling through at a breakneck speed through the city government, through the planning and zoning. But there's a lot of controversy, there's a lot of worry about it. Why do you feel like there's so much controversy, but yet we're also moving to having deals done behind closed doors, to having public hearing time really cut down greatly at these city council meetings? What's the rush? Why are they doing this so quickly?
Well, I mean, other than the obvious that, you know, they talk that we like to have transparency. Gee, we like to have people come to the meetings and tell us things. But, oh, by the way, now you only have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't get to talk 2 minutes for each topic. You get that's all you get, period.
Yeah.
And on top of everything else, one thing we haven't mentioned is that between the time they approved the sale in 2023, in June of 2023, roughly a year and a half ago, we've now had the college has announced the Public Performing Arts Center,
Downtown
where the existing library is downtown, which is, we don't know the exact number. I've heard the 1,000 mentioned, 1,000-seat auditorium. Obviously a very big building. It's to be used for classes, other things besides just performances. So that's to go where the library is. The library is moving out to the old Ward Foundation building.
But again, a process that's happened very quickly. This is
Yeah, that's right.
This whole project, that project is not on the current capital improvement plan for the county, but yet they've moved forward with moving that out.
Well,
now.
but bear in mind the changing the old library over to the Performing Arts Center, which I assume would just be demolishing it and building a new building. That's not the county. That's the state doing that.
Yeah.
That's the college.
But the county is the one who is
The
approved.
county would be doing the new library location at the Ward Foundation, and they have appropriated 2-3 months ago, I think it was $330,000 to do the initial planning, the architectural and engineering planning for that.
Yeah.
So that's on a, you know, maybe not fast track, but it's certainly not being slow walked.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So given this process, if this does pass a second reading on Monday, there's a difference between it passing, say, 4-1 versus 3-2. Is that accurate?
Well, if they get 3 votes, it passes.
Yes.
So it can either be 5, 4, or 3.
Yes.
Any of those numbers would pass it.
But if it does seem to pass 4-1, and it's very unlikely to pass 5-0,
Yeah.
then that would, in essence, kind of veto-proof it from Randy Taylor. Although he could still
Well, not,
veto
not
it.
necessarily, because sometimes people who vote for something, if it's vetoed, then do not vote to override the veto. It's not cast in stone, but I mean, it is an indication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it does pass, whether it passes 3-2 or 4-1, and whether it gets vetoed or overridden or not vetoed at all, once this passes, this is going to be the new planning and zoning text, right?
Yeah, and it would apply to the entire downtown area. For example, and just to give you some other examples, the health department building that's in the old J.C. Penney's property on Main Street, next to the parking garage, that building, the county's going to be leaving there, going out to the Verizon building on Route 50 in a year or so. So that's going to open. I mean, there are a lot of buildings that could open up for either more apartments, more retail, more whatever.
But probably not more parking.
Yeah, well, they won't have any parking,
And they don't
They're
have
not.
to.
Yeah, they're not required to have any parking.
So what do you think the business owners downtown who have come out and said they're very concerned about this, what is likely their next move? Because you said when the appeal happened before, a group of you got behind it and really fought it.
I mean, they have several alternatives. Grin and bear it.
Yeah.
Head for the hills.
Okay.
You know, I mean, for example, Kuhn's Jewelers. I don't think Kuhn's Jewelers, from what I've heard, is not at all interested in coming back, no matter what happens down. My guess is, just common sense tells me, and I had an office downtown there for over 40 years, that I would be thinking about moving elsewhere because they had to have clients to come to the office.
Well, we've heard a few businesses who have decided to relocate from downtown just since the Unity Plaza was built, because of the construction and the taking up of parking there. This would be taking out parking on a whole nother grand scheme. This would really limit it.
A
right?
massive. And yes, we may have a parking garage and we may have another one, but at least in an area like this, a lot of people don't abide parking garages for various reasons. I parked in one because that's where the permits were. But after I stopped my office there, when I went downtown, I didn't use the parking garage until very recently, until they closed some of those open lots.
Well, and we've mentioned it before, but for someone who's living out in the county who's maybe not thinking this is going to impact them day to day, it still does impact you if you need to go down for jury duty, or if you need to go into, say you want to go to a county council meeting and make your voice heard there. This is really going to limit the available space that we have to park downtown, right?
Oh, for sure. And if there is any kind of commercial or residential, retail or restaurant renovation and rejuvenation downtown, that's going to add for parking.
Yeah.
So essentially, to me, it looks like we're strangling Salisbury.
Yeah.
Is what's happening.
And
So,
we could possibly see a stunt in that other growth if there is if
possible.
customers just can't
Yeah.
even get
Yeah.
down there.
I mean, I grew up as a kid not far from Glen Burnie. Now, this is in the 50s. I'm showing my age. Glen Burnie was a nice little town. And then the developers hit it.
Yeah.
And now, look at Glen Burnie.
Yeah.
I mean, don't drive up and look at it. It's not worth the
Yeah.
drive.
That's probably not the aspiration we
Yeah,
should have here
right.
in Salisbury.
But I see something like that happening here.
Well, thanks for coming in today. I'm really hoping that people heed your voice and go out and make their voice heard. If they want to do comments for the January 13th meeting, they have to register online by noon on Monday, correct?
Yeah, that's the edict.
Yeah.
They either have to register online by Monday noon, or you can come to the meeting, which is going to be in the evening, starting at 6. But if you don't get there by 6, you can't comment.
And then you get 2 minutes.
You have to, yeah.
Not
and
4.
Regardless of which way you do it, you get 2 minutes.
Well, thanks for coming in and talking about it with us today. And hopefully people will register, go make their voice heard. And thank you. I'll get you to come back in a little while and give us an update on where we're at.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you for watching this episode of Open Agenda. We'll be back next week with another new episode.